The sound of laughter sliced through the school courtyard like broken glass. A crowd had gathered, phones out, faces twisted in cruel amusement. In the center stood a new boy, his uniform clean, his shoes polished, his eyes silent. One of the bullies leaned forward and spat, the glob landing on his cheek. The courtyard erupted in jeers, but the boy did not move. He simply wiped his face, straightened his back, and stared, not with fear, but with the calm of someone who had already faced far worse. Something in his stillness made even the bullies hesitate. Before we dive deeper into this powerful, true-to-life story of strength, dignity, and racial injustice, make sure to subscribe to my channel, Racism Untold Stories, where every story reveals the truth behind prejudice and the power of those who rise above it. Malik Carter was used to new beginnings that felt more like restarts. By the time he turned 16, he had already attended 6 different schools across 3 states. Every move carried the same promise from his mother. "This one will be better." She said it each time with tired hope in her eyes, the kind that mothers wear when they have been both protector and provider for too long. Their latest move brought them to a town called Crestwood, a place where the lawns were manicured and the neighbors waved from behind polished fences. Malik's mother, Denise Carter, had managed to secure a nursing position at the local hospital after months of applying. It paid well enough for them to rent a small 2-bedroom apartment on the far edge of town. The apartment complex was modest but clean, surrounded by fields that smelled faintly of rain and asphalt. To Malik, it felt temporary, like every other stop before it. The first morning of school began quietly. The sun had barely risen when Malik stood in front of the mirror, fastening the second-hand buttons on his shirt. His mother had ironed it carefully the night before, smoothing each wrinkle with love and exhaustion. The shirt was white, a little too tight around the shoulders, and paired with black slacks that had faded slightly from wear. His shoes were clean but old, polished until they shone. His mother smiled when she saw him. "You look sharp," she said softly, handing him a lunch wrapped in foil. "Remember, keep your head high. You belong anywhere you walk." Malik nodded. He wanted to believe her, but belonging had never come easily. Every new place greeted him with the same curious eyes, some curious, some cautious, a few quietly cruel. He had learned early that his dark skin and calm manner made him stand out in spaces where most faces did not look like his. Crestwood High was larger than any school he had attended before. The hallways gleamed under fluorescent lights, lined with rows of lockers that reflected polished sneakers and brand-new backpacks. The students moved in clusters, laughing loudly, their confidence filling every space. Malik walked among them quietly, his footsteps steady, his face expressionless. He could feel the difference almost instantly. It was not hostility, it was distance, a subtle, practiced form of exclusion. The kind that did not need words, the kind that lived in glances and silences. Teachers greeted him with professional politeness. Students turned to stare, their eyes assessing, measuring, deciding. During his first class, he sat at the back of the room, taking notes diligently while the others whispered and shared jokes across aisles. The teacher, a woman with kind but distracted eyes, asked him to introduce himself. Malik stood and said his name clearly. A few students nodded. One boy in the front snickered quietly, as if Malik's very presence amused him. The teacher ignored it. At lunch, Malik sat alone. The cafeteria was loud, filled with laughter that echoed off tiled walls. The smell of pizza and French fries filled the air. He found an empty table in the corner and unwrapped the sandwich his mother had made. The bread was slightly crushed, but he ate slowly, focused, pretending not to notice the glances that drifted his way. Across the room, 3 boys dominated the center of attention: Tyler, Jason, and Blake. Their names carried weight even to someone new. They were the kind of boys who never needed to introduce themselves. Their confidence did it for them. Tyler, tall and broad-shouldered, had a smirk that never seemed to leave his face. Jason was the loudest, always laughing, always performing for attention. Blake was quieter but crueler, the kind who hid behind charm. Malik watched them for a moment, then turned his gaze back to his food. He had learned long ago that attention from boys like that only led to trouble. After lunch, as Malik walked toward his next class, he heard footsteps behind him. "Nice bag," one voice said mockingly. A gentle tug followed, his backpack yanked slightly from behind. Malik turned but said nothing. The boys grinned, waiting for a reaction. When none came, they walked away laughing. That night, Malik returned home tired but silent. His mother asked about his first day. He said it was fine. She smiled, relieved. She did not need to know about the laughter, or the way the teachers looked at him with polite distance. She had enough burdens of her own. Later that evening, Malik walked to the small dojo located behind a local grocery store. The sign above the door was faded, but the moment he stepped inside, the world felt different. The faint scent of sweat and sandalwood filled the air. Wooden floors gleamed under the soft light, and the rhythmic sounds of movement echoed through the space. "Bow before you enter," came a calm voice. It was Master Watanabe, a man in his 70s with sharp eyes and a presence that demanded quiet respect. Malik bowed deeply, his posture perfect. He had been training since he was 10 years old. Martial arts had been his refuge, not a weapon, but a discipline. It taught him control in a world that constantly tried to provoke him. Under Master Watanabe's guidance, Malik had earned his black belt before his 15th birthday. His movements were precise, his patience unmatched. "Peace before power," his teacher often said. "You fight only when there is no other choice, and even then, you must fight with purpose." Malik carried those words everywhere he went. They were his armor against the noise of the world. Each evening he trained until his muscles trembled and his mind quieted. When he left the dojo, he felt lighter, calmer, stronger. Days turned into weeks. Malik's silence at school continued to draw attention. Some students respected it. Others mistook it for weakness. The whispers grew. Small acts of cruelty began. A book pushed off his desk, a pencil snapped in half, his name whispered mockingly in hallways. He never responded. He never complained. He simply endured. One morning, he arrived to find his locker covered in marker, crude drawings, racial slurs written in bold letters. The sight made his chest tighten, but he stood there quietly, the laughter of nearby students burning into his ears. He opened his backpack, pulled out a cloth, and began to clean it. Slowly, carefully, without a word. The more he erased the ink, the more it stained his fingertips, but he continued until the surface shone clean again. When he turned, he noticed Tyler watching from across the hallway, smirking. Malik met his gaze for a brief moment. Tyler looked away first. That evening at the dojo, Malik trained harder than usual. His strikes were sharper, his breathing measured but fierce. Master Watanabe watched him silently. "Pain," the old man said quietly, "is the first teacher. Anger is the last. Do not let the last teach you before you are ready." Malik nodded, sweat dripping down his brow. He understood. By the end of the month, tension followed him everywhere. The bullies grew bolder. They threw paper at him in class, tripped him in hallways, called him names behind his back, yet his silence remained unbroken. But silence, as Malik knew, could only hold for so long before the world forced it to speak. And when that day came, it would not be words that spoke for him. It would be truth, expressed through motion, through control, through the quiet strength that no one expected from the boy they thought was easy to break. Malik's story was only beginning, and Crestwood High had no idea that beneath his calm exterior lived a storm waiting to rise. The days that followed were heavy with unease. The hallways of Crestwood High felt tighter, the air thicker. Whispers followed Malik like shadows. Some students avoided his gaze entirely, while others watched him with mocking curiosity. The incident at his locker had not been reported. Malik had cleaned every inch of it himself, determined not to give his tormentors the satisfaction of knowing how deeply it cut. But cruelty, once it senses silence, does not retreat. It grows bolder. The bullies' small games turned into orchestrated humiliation. A shove in the hallway here, a spilled drink there. Someone, accidentally, knocked his lunch onto the floor. Each time, Malik remained calm. His hands would tighten briefly at his sides, but he would never respond. He had learned from Master Watanabe that violence born from anger is defeat disguised as victory. Malik refused to let his anger speak for him. Yet Crestwood High was not built to admire quiet strength. It celebrated noise, performance, dominance, the very traits Tyler, Jason, and Blake embodied. To them, Malik's composure was not a sign of discipline. It was a challenge to their power. One rainy afternoon, as Malik walked through the courtyard after gym class, he heard footsteps behind him. The sound echoed against the wet pavement. "Hey, Carter!" someone called. He kept walking. The footsteps quickened. A hand grabbed his shoulder, spinning him around. It was Tyler, rain dripping from his hair, eyes bright with arrogant amusement. "You think you are too good to talk to people?" he asked, his tone sharp, his voice raised enough for others to hear. Jason and Blake stood behind him, their faces twisted in anticipation. Malik looked at Tyler, his face expressionless. He said nothing. Tyler's smirk widened. "Say something, man. Or can you not speak unless someone tells you to?" Laughter rippled behind him from a small group of students who had stopped to watch. The rain grew heavier, pooling around Malik's shoes. He stared at the ground for a moment, then back at Tyler. The calm in his eyes seemed to unsettle the other boy. When Malik turned to walk away, Jason stepped forward and blocked his path. "Where do you think you are going?" he said mockingly. "Let him go," Blake said quietly, though his grin suggested he did not mean it. Tyler shook his head. "No, he needs to learn." He reached down, scooped a handful of muddy rainwater, and flicked it toward Malik's shoes. The splatter left a dark stain across the fabric. The laughter came again, louder this time. Malik took a deep breath. His jaw tightened, but his voice remained even when he finally spoke. "Move." Tyler raised an eyebrow, surprised to hear sound come from him at all. "What was that?" "Move," Malik repeated, his tone steady. Jason laughed. "You heard him, Ty. He thinks he is Bruce Lee." Tyler stepped closer until their faces were only inches apart. "Or maybe he thinks he is better than us," he said softly, "because that is what people like him always think." The rain drowned the silence that followed. Malik's eyes did not waver. Then, for a long, tense moment, no one moved. The rain fell harder. Tyler blinked, breaking eye contact first. Malik turned and walked away. That moment burned in Tyler's pride like acid. By the next day, the entire school was whispering about how the new kid stood up to Tyler. Stories spread faster than truth could catch them. Some said Malik had threatened him, others claimed he had shoved him. The bullies' egos bruised easily, and humiliation demanded retribution. They began to plan. A week later, the perfect moment presented itself. A bright Friday afternoon with clear skies and restless energy. The final bell had rung, and the courtyard was alive with students laughing, running, filming short videos for social media. Malik was walking toward the gate when he heard his name shouted from behind. He turned. Tyler stood with Jason and Blake, their faces lit with cruel anticipation. The crowd sensed something was about to happen and began to gather. Phones were raised, eager eyes drawn like moths to flame. Malik felt the familiar tightening in his chest. Not fear, but awareness. He had seen this moment before, in different cities, with different faces. It always looked the same. The stage, the laughter, the arrogance. Tyler approached, his sneakers crunching against the gravel. "You got something to say now, tough guy?" he called out. Malik said nothing. He adjusted the strap of his backpack and stood still. The calm in his posture irritated Tyler more than words ever could. Jason stepped forward, circling him. "Come on, do something," he taunted. "Let us see what you got." The crowd grew louder. Some students shouted encouragement. Others whispered nervously. The moment was turning electric, the kind of moment young people feed on without understanding the cost. Tyler smirked, glancing around as if to ensure every camera was pointed at him. "He is scared," he announced loudly. "All that attitude and now nothing to say." Then he did the unthinkable. He spat. The sound was sharp and final. The spit hit Malik's cheek and rolled slowly down his face. For a heartbeat, the entire courtyard froze. Even the wind seemed to stop. The crowd waited, some expecting an explosion, others hoping for it. Malik's hand rose slowly. He wiped his cheek with his sleeve, his expression unchanged. He looked up at Tyler. There was no anger in his eyes, only disappointment. Quiet, controlled, and immeasurably strong. Tyler stepped back, uncertain now. Malik's stillness unnerved him. He had expected rage, shouting, anything to prove his power, but Malik gave him nothing. Jason laughed nervously. "Look at him. He is not going to do anything." That was when Tyler pushed him. The push was hard, deliberate. Malik stumbled one step back but did not fall. The crowd gasped. "Come on," Tyler said, his voice cracking with adrenaline. "Do something!" Blake joined in, shoving Malik's shoulder. "What? You too scared?" Malik exhaled slowly. His hand dropped to his side. His breathing changed, deeper, controlled, like the rhythm of training. Then Tyler swung. The punch came fast but sloppy, driven by ego, not skill. Malik moved before most even saw it. His arm deflected the blow, his foot pivoted, and in one fluid motion, Tyler was on the ground, breathless, staring up at the sky. The courtyard erupted in shock. Jason lunged next, shouting something incoherent. Malik sidestepped, caught his wrist, twisted, and sent him sprawling beside his friend. Blake hesitated, then charged forward. Malik stepped aside, swept his leg, and the boy fell hard into the gravel. 3 movements. 3 seconds. The silence that followed was deafening. Malik stood still, breathing slowly, his posture unchanged. He looked down at the boys who had mocked, laughed, and spat at him, not with triumph, but with quiet restraint. He had fought without anger. He had defended himself with control. He took one step back, bowed slightly, and turned to leave. The crowd parted, stunned into silence. No one dared laugh now. The boy they had called weak had just rewritten the meaning of strength. As Malik walked away, the sound of phones recording filled the air. Within minutes, the videos would spread beyond Crestwood High, beyond the town, beyond the moment itself. But for now, Malik simply walked home in the fading light, his footsteps steady, his spirit unbroken, and his silence louder than any victory cry could ever be. That night, when he reached the dojo, Master Watanabe looked at him and said nothing. Malik bowed deeply. The old man saw the calm in his eyes and nodded once, as if he already knew, because true strength, Master Watanabe had always said, is not in the strike. It is in the restraint before it. And that day, Malik had shown the world what real power looked like. By Monday morning, the world of Crestwood High had changed forever. The courtyard fight was no longer just a schoolyard incident. It had become a spectacle, a headline, a symbol. The video spread across every platform overnight, shared, replayed, and analyzed by strangers across the country. At first, it appeared as a short, shaky clip filmed from a student's phone. 3 boys laughing, circling a quiet figure. A sudden punch. 3 rapid movements, then silence. The caption read, "Black kid defends himself against bullies. Within hours, it had thousands of views. By the next morning, millions. The internet had chosen its hero and its villains. Malik's name was whispered in classrooms, staff lounges, and even the town's coffee shops. Teachers played the video behind closed doors, shaking their heads in disbelief. Some praised Malik's control, while others criticized him for responding with violence. Parents called the school board, demanding explanations. The principal, a man named Mr. Hanley, summoned Malik to his office. The room smelled faintly of coffee and old books, the blinds half drawn to block the glare. Malik sat across from the desk, his posture straight, his face calm. Mr. Hanley folded his hands, his expression heavy with the burden of politics. "Malik," he began, his voice careful, "I have seen the video. I have spoken to the other students involved. I understand that you were provoked, but I need to ask you something. Why did you not walk away?" Malik looked at him steadily. "I did," he said quietly, "until I could not." The words hung in the air. They were simple, but they carried the weight of every time Malik had swallowed humiliation to keep peace. Every time he had been told to be the bigger person, even when that meant enduring cruelty. Mr. Hanley sighed. He wanted to say something comforting, but the politics of the situation were already spiraling beyond his control. The bullies' parents were powerful, men and women with influence, connections, and reputations to protect. They had already begun to twist the narrative. By the afternoon, one of them had posted on social media claiming that their sons were attacked without cause by a violent student. The post gathered support from those who did not know the truth and did not care to learn it. Screenshots of Malik's calm face during the fight circulated with comments like, "He looks cold. That is scary." Malik went home that day to find reporters waiting outside the apartment complex. His mother's car was parked crookedly in the driveway, her face pale as she stepped out to meet him. "Do not say a word," she whispered, holding his arm. Her voice trembled. "They are trying to twist this. They want you to look angry." That night, Malik stayed awake long after she fell asleep. He sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. His phone buzzed constantly, messages from classmates, strangers, journalists. Some sent support, others sent threats. He turned it off. At the dojo the next evening, Master Watanabe waited for him in silence. The old man stood barefoot on the wooden floor, his expression unreadable. "You fought," he said softly. Malik nodded. "Did you win?" the master asked. Malik hesitated. "I defended myself." "That is not what I asked." Malik looked down. "I do not know." Master Watanabe nodded slowly. "Good. Then you are still learning." The old man turned and walked toward the far wall, where a faded banner hung. The calligraphy on it read, "Victory without honor is defeat." Malik understood what it meant. He had not fought to win. He had fought to end something. But now he realized the battle had only just begun, and it was not one of fists or strikes. It was one of truth and perception. The next morning, Malik and his mother were called to a meeting at the school. The conference room was crowded with administrators, the bullies' parents, and their sons, Tyler, Jason, and Blake. They looked smaller now, their confidence stripped away. Yet their parents' presence filled the room with an air of superiority that demanded attention. One of the fathers, a tall man in an expensive suit, leaned forward. "My son was assaulted," he said sharply. "We have lawyers reviewing the footage. There is no justification for violence like that, especially in a school setting." Malik's mother tightened her grip on her son's hand. "Your son spat on mine," she said calmly. "Your son humiliated mine. My son defended himself after weeks of harassment," the father smirked. "Boys will be boys, but this was excessive." Before Malik could speak, the principal played the full video on a projector screen. The room darkened as the footage began. There it was. Tyler's laughter, Jason's taunts, the shove, the spit. Then Malik's calm defense, fluid and disciplined. The truth unfolded in front of them, undeniable and unfiltered. When the video ended, silence filled the room. The father looked away. The mother of another boy pressed her lips together, shame flickering in her eyes. Mr. Hanley cleared his throat. Based on the evidence, it is clear that Malik acted in self-defense. There will be no disciplinary action taken against him. Denise Carter exhaled shakily, relief flooding her face. But Malik remained still. He could feel the stares of those who still refused to accept what they had seen. For some people, the truth was not enough. That evening, Malik walked home alone. The sun was low, the light golden on the streets. Cars passed slowly, drivers glancing at him as if recognizing him from somewhere they could not name. When he reached the apartment, he found a letter slipped under the door. It was from Master Watanabe. Inside was a single sentence written in neat, deliberate handwriting. A man's calm in chaos is his truest weapon. Malik smiled faintly. He placed the note on his nightstand and sat in silence for a long time. Days later, the media storm began to fade. The Bullies' families withdrew their complaints quietly. The world moved on, chasing the next viral story. But inside Crestwood High, the atmosphere had changed. Teachers watched their words more carefully. Students whispered Malik's name with a mix of fear and respect. Tyler avoided him completely. When their eyes met in the hallway one afternoon, Tyler looked down. His once proud shoulders sagged under the weight of guilt that he refused to name. Malik did not hate him. He did not need to. He had seen what hate did to people, how it consumed them, how it reduced them. Instead, Malik focused on what he could control. He continued his training, his studies, and his silence. Every morning, he walked into the same courtyard where it had all begun. The tree that had watched everything now stood tall above him, leaves whispering softly in the wind. The fight had changed him. Not because it made him famous, but because it revealed something that had always been inside him, the strength to face hatred without letting it poison his heart. The world had tried to label him as violent, dangerous, angry. But Malik had shown them something far greater, dignity that could not be shaken, even in the face of cruelty. And somewhere deep down, he knew this was not just his story. It was a reflection of countless others who had endured injustice quietly, choosing strength over bitterness, grace over vengeance. The world had seen his calm. Now, perhaps, it would begin to understand its power. Weeks passed, and life at Crestwood High slowly returned to its routines, but nothing felt the same. The courtyard that once echoed with laughter at Malik's expense now carried a quieter energy. The students who had once mocked him glanced his way with caution, curiosity, or respect. They whispered behind their hands, unsure whether to approach or to avoid the boy whose silence had spoken louder than any words ever could. Malik walked the hallways with the same steady steps, his gaze forward, his posture unyielding. He did not seek attention, nor did he try to assert dominance. Yet people noticed him in ways they never had before. Teachers who had once glanced past him now nodded in acknowledgement. Students who had previously ignored him approached with tentative smiles, asking questions about martial arts, about discipline, about the quiet power they had witnessed. Even Tyler, Jason, and Blake had begun to change. The confidence that once defined them was replaced with a cautious awareness. They no longer strutted through hallways, mocking or provoking others. There was no public apology, no grand reconciliation, yet Malik's example had spoken in a language they understood, the language of consequence and truth. Actions, it seemed, carried weight beyond words. Malik's mother, Denise Carter, watched these changes with a mixture of relief and quiet pride. She still worried about the world outside her son's control, but she also saw something she had always known. Malik possessed a strength that was rare and necessary. It was not just his skill in martial arts, it was his ability to endure, to remain calm, and to protect his integrity. She often thought about the long nights she spent working double shifts at the hospital, and she knew that her sacrifices had nurtured more than survival. They had nurtured character. In the dojo, Master Watanabe continued to guide him with patience and precision. The old man never praised him for the fight. He simply reinforced the lessons that had always been present. "Strength is not the absence of fear," he said quietly one evening, "but the mastery of it. You have shown courage, Malik, but remember, humility and restraint are the true markers of power." Malik absorbed these words, knowing that they were the key to the next stage of his journey. He could not allow one moment of triumph to define him. There were other battles to face, battles of perception, of justice, of moral courage, and he needed to be ready for all of them. As the school year continued, Malik found small ways to influence the environment around him. He quietly helped younger students who were being harassed, offering advice and guidance without ever seeking recognition. He tutored classmates struggling in math and science, often without acknowledgement. His actions created ripples that gradually transformed the culture of the school. What had been a place of subtle cruelty began to develop corners of respect, understanding, and quiet empathy. The bullies, once brash and unrelenting, slowly began to understand what Malik had already known. The measure of a person was not determined by who they could intimidate, but by who they could respect and protect. Tyler, Jason, and Blake no longer mocked others, but they did not openly seek forgiveness either. They carried the lesson silently, the shame and awareness marking them more profoundly than any punishment could. The community beyond the school also took notice. The story of the new student who had endured weeks of harassment and stood his ground spread through local newspapers and online platforms. People commented on the video with admiration and reflection, drawing lessons about respect, racial prejudice, and the importance of integrity. Malik's quiet heroism had unintentionally sparked conversations about behavior, accountability, and the subtle ways bias can manifest in everyday life. Malik himself did not seek recognition. He knew that true change was not measured in likes, shares, or attention. It was measured in the small shifts that occurred when people saw courage in action and realized their own choices mattered. By the end of the semester, the courtyard was different. The laughter remained, but it was less sharp, less cruel. The whispers were no longer mocking, but sometimes inquisitive, as students watched Malik walk with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced injustice and remained unbroken. Even the teachers adjusted, creating a more inclusive environment, consciously calling out subtle prejudice and modeling fairness. Malik's reputation grew not because he fought, but because he had acted with honor in a world eager to judge. He had revealed a truth the school had not expected, that dignity and strength could coexist, and that appearances often hid the most powerful realities. Students learned that the boy they had labeled new and different was someone worth observing, listening to, and eventually respecting. By the time summer arrived, Malik had changed Crestwood High in ways that no bulletin or assembly could formally recognize. He had transformed the culture through example, demonstrating that courage, discipline, and integrity were not just abstract ideals, but actionable truths. And as he walked home on the last day of school, sunlight glinting off the leaves, Malik understood something deeply, that the real battle was never about fists. It was about perception, about standing firm against injustice, about embodying the principles one hoped the world would one day recognize. True strength is not measured by the ability to fight, but by the courage to remain calm, disciplined, and ethical in the face of cruelty. The world often judges based on appearances, class, and prejudice, yet real power lies in restraint, integrity, and compassion. Malik's journey reminds us that actions speak louder than words, and that the quiet perseverance of one individual can shift entire communities. enduring injustice without allowing it to consume you, standing tall even when unseen, and protecting one's dignity is the highest form of resistance and the most lasting form of influence. If this story inspired you, share it with others and reflect on its message. Let it remind the world that courage and dignity are timeless lessons. For more stories of truth, justice, and social transformation, subscribe now to Racism Untold Stories. Each story uncovers hidden realities, challenges prejudice, and celebrates the strength of those who rise above hatred. Do not miss the chance to witness the power of resilience and join us in spreading awareness one story at a time.